Good morning to all our viewers from USA and a very good evening to our viewers from India. Thank you so much for joining in. I am Shraboni Paul from Neuworldz, and I take the pleasure to welcome you all on Veteran AdVantage, the program which tries to bring in the veteran transition support program and learning for both US and Indian veterans on one platform. I take the pleasure to welcome our guest speakers and keynote speakers, Mr. Nick Wimmy, who is from the US Army. He was on the Infantry Parachute Regiment, and he served with Afghanistan and Iraq for quite a long tenure just after 9/11. And he is currently with the University of Iowa hospitals and serving in the healthcare divisions. We have with us from India, Indian Army officer retired Colonel Girish Vishweshwaran, who joins us as our guest speaker today. He had the opportunity to serve in the highest battlefields, which is Siachen, and some of the great experiences that come from there. Currently, he is with Amazon India as the EHS manager. And I take the pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, Commander Raja Narayan Swamy, who is also a very senior manager with Amazon, and he had a fantastic tenure with the Indian Naval Services. He was with some very exciting warships and submarines and a lot of communication systems with radars and sonars while he served the Navy. And right now he is working with artificial intelligence and machine learning and a lot of those transitions in the corporate. So a lot of learning and transitions to happen here. I take the pleasure to welcome our speakers, and I take it forward to Commander Raja. Would you want to go ahead, take this ahead?
Oh yes, thank you, Shavani, and thank you everybody. Good morning, good evening to everybody. This is an absolute pleasure to be on a forum like this, and that too from veterans across the globe. And this is my first international collaboration, so to speak. So, let me just start off by wishing all of the veterans who are transitioning or looking to transition all the very best. I think that's an order. And if the record of veterans in the corporate sector is anything to go by, I think we are all set up for success already, and all of you are winners in your own right. The military service is something that most of us join at a very young age, and the fact that you made that decision to move on and rekindle your life in a completely different ecosystem, that itself shows that people are ready for a challenge, and in that sense, those are the hallmarks of winners. Now, it's been 6 years since I transitioned, and when I look back, I realized that the military to corporate transition space today is much more active and agile, and we have these multiple support systems and networks and perspectives in place. Of course, there's the power of social media, which has contributed to this great awareness among veterans of concepts like personal branding, upskilling, reskilling, terms which were, hitherto unknown in our times. And I'm sounding like an oldie right now. but overall, this is fantastic. Before I sort of talk about my own personal journey, which is what Shravani wanted me to start off with, I have a couple of cautionary notes. It's only in order so that this is more like a disclaimer of sorts. A lot of lessons and insights that I'm going to talk about and stuff that I'm going to share weren't really formally taught to me, and these are stuff that I picked up and discovered along the way intuitively. And this is going to be true of every veteran who has made this journey and who is looking to make this journey. So in that sense, there is nothing cast in stone or unique about the approach that I'm telling you, and please feel free to mold it the way it works for you. So what I will do is I'll give you the big picture as part of my talk, and if there are any specific points that you want to draw upon, Girish is there, I am there, and we can probably pick that specific aspects up in the Q&A session. That's the first piece. The second piece is a little more tricky, right? All of us who've been in uniform or who are in uniform, we draw a great strength from affiliations. We talk of academy types, regiment types, squadron types, ship types, military school types. And in many ways, these collective identities define us and our personalities. Now, while that is part of our DNA, it is inevitable and it's got its own advantages. I want to start off saying that the military to corporate transition is about discovering your intrinsic worth as an individual, minus the stripes, minus the stars, minus the uniform, and all these affiliations. So, just for the period of this transition and this lecture at least, think of yourself as an individual, minus all of these, and it will help you evaluate yourself ruthlessly, uh, in terms of the skills and competencies that you bring to the table. And I think the self awareness of what you possess in terms of potential that will stand you in good stead in the corporate sector, I think that is key to a successful transition. With that background, let me quickly sort of jump into my own journey, and I'll not bore you with too much of the specifics, but I'll try and link them with certain good insights that I drew. So I joined the Naval Academy after high school in the July of 1991, Indian Naval Academy, and I was the first in my family to join the armed forces. I came from a family of bankers and government employees, and in that sense, my life had average plastered all over it. I wasn't a great sportsman or really physically active or anything. I was good with my studies, and in the academy, I would manage to clear my physical test, my swimming test, my training with a little bit of effort. If you were to ask my postmates, they would possibly remember me as nothing extraordinary, just one of those guys in the crowd, and not really somebody who would stand out, right? So the only mantra that I had for myself, now that I think about it, was that I told myself, I'm not going to give up, or I'm not going to go back. And that's an attitude that stayed with me ever since. So when I stood seventh in a batch of 92 Sea cadets, at the end of my sea training, basic cadets training, sea training, the commanding officer, the training commander, all of them were taken by surprise because, I was this low profile guy, like I said, blink and miss variety, just going about his business. And I ended up being among the top 10. Uh, in the Navy itself, I had a fantastic professional journey. I had some exciting stints at sea, served time on board destroyers, frigates, missile corvettes, tenure, tankers, etc. I did a couple of tenures in repair yards, saw some interesting operations. I was part of some interesting R&D ventures, research and development ventures. The Indian Navy is on an indigenization spree and technology upgradation spree. So we had a lot of partnership with the defense R&D organization and the industry. So those were some interesting experiences. In terms of academic courses through the service, I think I ticked all the right boxes. The Navy, thanks to the Navy, I managed to do a post-graduation course for among the best institutes in the country. I did a couple of management capsules. Now, in that sense, my career was checkered with a number of difference, which I didn't recognize at that point. And looking back, I realized that there were a couple of opportunities that came my way, which my batchmates or my peer group didn't perhaps consider mainstream enough. But I did that. I took those, and looking backward, I think they have really, really worked for me well. Uh, when I think about it, I realized that there are essentially two things that I did well. One was to make use or make the best of these diverse experiences and develop a skill set that was unique to me. The armed forces has got this training regimentation which kind of paints everybody in the same hue. So I was in terms of my experience profile, I was a little different, and I had these unique skill sets. So that was a very, very positive thing. The second thing was, my ability to put together and stitch this experience profile into a narrative that made sense for the corporate sector. And that's the first insight that I want to share with you guys. I think it's super important that whatever our unique experience profile in the services, and all of us go through these different appointments, different postings, different tenures, it's super important to build it into a unique narrative and a unique story. And when you transition, you need to go over this narrative again and again and again. And this narrative has to be you plastered all over it. It has to be uniquely you. What it does is, this narrative is what will put you apart, like I said, from the assembly line approach, and it will put your story out there in a manner that is very, very different. So, like I was saying, specifically with regard to me, I did grab opportunities that were aligned with my skill sets. Even as a senior cadet, I picked up, we had this Naval Academy magazine called Ahoy, and I became the editor in chief. I was okay with writing and communication. My stint with the Defense R&D organization came immediately after my MTech course, and the idea of working with the scientists in a project that was sort of still taking off wasn't exactly glamorous and mainstream. But what it did for me is it opened up another opportunity as part of the Indian nuclear submarine program, where I got the opportunity to work with some leading scientists, and it gave me some great industry exposure. Similarly, when I was doing my sea time as a commander, I was part of a second crew who had taken over duties from the commissioning crew of a brand new ship. So we had a lot of unfinished business with OEMs, Italians in this case. We were part of acceptance trials. We were part of ranging and scaling of inventory. So in that sense, this was an exposure that was way beyond the normal MRO thing at sea, which is maintenance, repair, and operations thing. So, when I went through this phase, the seeds for me to leave service were sowed around 2012, a good about 3 years before I actually left the service. And when I did leave in August 2015, very few people were leaving at that point in time. That was because there was a new pay commission which was in the offing that was supposed to get effective from the January of 2016, which would have ensured a bigger pay hike and better retirement benefits for me. But as far as I was concerned, I wanted to get out, and I didn't want to waste a minute more while the fire in my belly was still burning. 4 months of waiting perhaps would have given me some more in terms of retirement benefits, but I wanted to get out and get there in the middle of the action. So that's my second insight to you, that if you made up your mind to transition, the best time is now, not tomorrow, not day after. Do not put it off and do not procrastinate, because every day lost is an opportunity lost. Right.
So
Let me quickly.
I would actually ask Nick, who is actually a US Army veteran. So, Nick, you had a very varied kind of an experience, because you were in the 505th Infantry Parachute Infantry Regiment. You served in Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan. So, very active zone, and from there you come into the healthcare sectors and corporate. So what has been your transition journey like? What was it like for you? And this was after 9/11 that you actually got into the US Army, so it must have been real action time. What was your journey?
Yeah, well, my first of all, thank you for asking me to attend this group. And I got to say, I was just in, it's been 17 years since I was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And the feeling I had when I was there, you felt like you're coming home in a way. You're around military folk, your people. And that's the same way I feel joining this group, even though I only know one of you, right? So it's good to be around people that have been in similar experiences. For me, I went in, I graduated from high school just a couple months before 9/11. I had nothing going on. I was going to community college just because that's what people did. I was failing my classes. I was just kind of loitering, basically. 9/11 happened, and all of the almost every single male in my family had been in the military, all officers except for one. And that was it. It's time to go. Time to sign up. And so I signed up. I actually get to serve in the same division that my grandfather did, who had 2 combat jumps in World War II. That's what I wanted to do. So I did it. I had no baggage at home, single, no kids. So let's just go all out. And I felt like I did. And we were busy. I was deployed all but 3 months of my time outside of training. And so for me, I got out at a good time. I was newly dating my now wife, and we're constantly getting deployed. And there were a lot of times during deployment where nothing was going on, but also when stuff was going on, it was about as terrible as it could get. And so she encouraged me to apply for college, and I did. And I thought, I'm never going to get into school. Well, when you have the GI Bill here in the United States, it's guaranteed payment for educational institutions. So you're going to get in. So I got in, decided to do it, and it was a good thing I did. My replacement actually was unfortunately killed. So had I not transitioned, I would not be here today. So I do feel very fortunate. For me, the transition was a challenge, as when you're in the military, it's you're often put up on a pedestal that you're, fighting for freedom and many good things. You get a lot of praise in public, and it was a challenge for me to not only go to the real world, which sometimes I think the United States is not the real world. It can be a challenge going from different parts of the world and seeing how people live, and then come to the United States, where it's kind of a candy land in a way. It's a challenge. What we hold valuable in the United States sometimes can be superficial, and that was a challenge for me, going from environments in Afghanistan to back to the United States. It's a challenge. But it was also a challenge for myself in the workplace, that I had a background going through the military where I learned hard work. You did not have an option to not you did not have an option in the military to not work hard, and you didn't have 8-hour days in the military. You're just constantly working, and you're working hard, and so that was ingrained in me in the military. Learning how to change a tire to learning how to be at work on time, I had that. And I think I know if an organization is going to hire a veteran, they're going to get that. That's not how it is really in the workforce. There's a lot of people that can be lazy, and a lot of complaints. And that was a challenge for me in terms of supervising people, that to have to take a step back and realize that the environment that I came from was not how a lot of people are. And earlier, sir, you said not letting military, it's just a part of you. And that's something now, 17 years out, has been very beneficial for me, that I do try to talk about when I just went back to North Carolina for a reunion. I see a lot of my colleagues that they let their military service 100% define them. And it can be, I think, a hindrance to them in adjusting to civilian life. But I think it's very beneficial if you use your military experiences as a chapter in your life. If I'm hiring somebody, we just hired somebody actually that was in the 82nd Airborne at the same time I was, and I was thrilled to hire them because it makes, I think military service just makes you more well-rounded. Again, but not letting it define myself. When I let it just be a part of me, just a chapter, I was able to open up a little bit more to new things. That's been my experience though, but the hard work has been nothing but beneficial for me. And in turn, I'm kind of a force multiplier for the folks that I lead. They kind of follow suit. And so we have if I'm in charge of a department, the low performers tend to jump ship, and the higher performers tend to come and want to work for me because they know that they're going to have a supervisor that's going to work hard and back them up. Yeah. So, and I owe that to the military. So.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for sharing that, Nick. In fact, this platform, this particular webinar is actually meant for that learning for both the veterans as well as the corporates, of so much that can be learned, because there's a lot of learning for the corporates as well. Because as I have seen in the last 16, 17 years in my career, where we hired a lot of veterans, certain times recruiters and hiring managers, they have a certain limited information about the military folks, thinking that there is just a certain skill set that they bring in, which is not the case. I think there's a big, vast, wide array of skill sets which is there from the military. In fact, when I was working with Cognizant, I was leading one of the training teams. We actually had a cross-industry learning experience with military veterans, so that they could actually share in some of the experience we could incorporate in an IT setup. And that was so beneficial. And that is exactly what we're trying to attain with platforms such as this, is experience share and learning, so that we can all benefit. Like veterans who are transitioning from the military to corp, as well as corporates who are trying to hire veterans. And also for those, because right now we are in a very multicultural and multinational kind of setup, where there are companies that are hiring veterans are not just located in one particular nation or continent. They are literally across the globe. So people who are transitioning probably from one location to another, and multicultural cross-cultural setups, they can also learn and adapt better. So I would now request Colonel Girish, who is our guest speaker also, to kindly share some intro about yourself and tell us something about your journey and transition.
Thank you so much, Shaboni. Having heard Nick and Raja sir, it's a pleasure and privilege to be on the same board as them. I started in 1997. I joined the National Defense Academy after 7 years of, again, I did a military schooling in a hostel for 7 years. And in 2000, I was commissioned in the Indian Army. Initial 3 years, I saw a lot of action. I've had 2 tenures of Siachen. And after 21 years, I decided to give it a shot outside. The reasons were again personal, primarily self-exploratory, because I was doing fairly well. Uh, with the military career now having been put behind me, now I would just simply want to go ahead and speak with respect to the transition for the audience. As far as the transition is concerned, I can only share my story as Raja said initially mentioned. Again, a disclaimer: there is no advice, set pattern. I can share my experience. As I said before, deciding to uh, quit the forces, I took an A4 sheet, pros and cons, and then matched my interests and long-term alignment with my thought process and what I really wanted to do in life. And then it struck me that yes, now was the time, because I had spent almost 32 years of my 43-year-old life in uniform. So I just wanted to explore what's outside. So that was the reason why I took a decision to see what's on the other side of the army. Now, when I decided to take a step outside, then there were again two options: entrepreneurship or employment. And I was pretty much aligned. Again, personal reasons, I was aligned to picking up an employment. There were a number of people who helped me out in the journey. First and foremost, LinkedIn. How I started with the transition around a year before I actually made the transition. I opened an account in LinkedIn. I'm just a year and a half old in LinkedIn. And then I started looking for job descriptions and job IDs, and then saw what was relevant, how I could match my skill set with the requirements. And then I decided to cover the blinds which were there. That's how I went through the transition path, and how I decided to reach out to so many connections on LinkedIn, including Commander Raja here and you yourself, Shaboni. You were all connections that I made on LinkedIn. And look at us talking here in one webinar. And in fact, Raja sir, I still remember he was quite busy the entire week, and it was very large-hearted of him that I troubled him on a weekday, and he agreed to meet me. So for breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning, I didn't tell him that, but then I picked up a cab from Bangalore and reached Chennai the next morning. And then I met him for breakfast there. So that was how I connected. So it was interesting, and I made a lot of friends on the path to my transition. And as time went by, I started upskilling myself, and probably realized initial mindset was many people that I spoken to were looking at us as a perfect fit for a security role or an admin role. But then as time went by, now we see many corporates opening up to the idea of the other verticals as well, including supply chain, operations, logistics, even procurement and program management to a large extent, including program management. So it's been a entire learning up curve throughout, and I still believe that there's a lot more to learn.
Yes.
And as far as upskilling goes and certifications goes, again, the blinds were covered. Mentorship, I had two mentorships, both of them. One of them was straight away from the LinkedIn portal. There was a form that was floated there, and I filled it in randomly one day. And then after 2 weeks, I got a mail saying that you've been aligned with so-and-so mentor who was a head in supply chain for the last years in a corporate firm, total civilian, who had opted to mentor a transitioning veteran. I had a 1 month session every week, 1 hour, absolutely value for time sessions, each one of them. We went through those sessions, including fine tuning my resume and many tips for transition and heads up on the corporate, how it functions, and matching the roles that I did in military with the corporate. That was important for me. And the other one was through another multinational that had run a campaign on LinkedIn. So that's how the mentorship happened. And as far as the network assist is concerned, was hugely helped and assisted by there are a number of networks for veterans that are currently running their own non-profit uh, uh, carriers or courses or webinars right now, LinkedIn and otherwise. For me, Forces Network assisted me. Reattire has come up in a big way. ForgeNet was one of the earliest pioneers in this segment. They have probably rekindled again their program. And through this network, I managed to understand what kind of skill the corporate is looking for. And I got the wherewithal as to how to go about it and probably certify myself into that role. So these were the network assist and resumes that happened. And as far as the applications are concerned, I must have applied at least 30 to 35. I must have applied at least 30 to 35, rather 10 to 12 companies and 30 to 35 applications I had given initial days. There was no revert. I was quite disappointed. But then again, I met a veteran who was very nice. He said, just don't worry, Girish. It happens to all of us. Transitioning, the apprehension remains till the time you don't cross the bridge. So one fine day, things will fall in place and it will happen. And the way he said it, within a month, I got at least 4 or 5 interview calls. And finally, when I had an offer, I had 3 offers in hand. I picked up Amazon, and this I had it in my hand before I quit. So that, in short, is my transition. I would be very happy to connect one-on-one as well to help out anyone with respect to the wherewithal, the reasons, or the upskilling, or the... Back to you, Shaboni.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey, Girish. In fact, this is something which is very important for a lot of veterans to understand. Like, you have been through a lot of certifications, as well as so 2 master's degree plus a certification program in AI from University of Texas and Great Lakes. So a lot of certification and formal educational, backup which you have for yourself. But I think one of the big challenges that a lot of veterans they face is when I'm transitioning from one particular kind of background which they bring in probably, and then get into something, then what kind of courses and learning experiences should I adapt to? We have one of... Yes, Girish.
I just have a submission here. As far as certifications were concerned, whenever people ask me what have you learned through the certification, I'm very clear when I tell them that certification is an add-on. The core is me.
Yes.
My last 20 years and 25 years of experience, the core is me. These certifications are an add-on which will probably help me on the job and help me hone my skills further. So that we'll have to be very clear.
Thank you so much for stating that, because this is exactly where I was coming to, because, there's a reason why. Yes, Raja sir, please.
Yeah. No. Thanks, Girish. I think it's a very interesting point you make.
Yes.
And with the growing awareness and growing availability of all of these networks, one of the things I've seen is people tend to chase buzzwords, which means this is the emerging field and I need to go get there.
Yes.
What I tell people whenever they speak to me is that the certifications on their own will not get you a job, although any amount of learning is conceptually beneficial.
Yes.
And what you need to be doing as a veteran is to try and get certifications which are aligned with what you've done thus far in the service. So if you're somebody who's worked in logistics and supply chain, try and do something in that area. Or if you've handled projects or programs, try and do a PMP or something which gives you. Yes. It does not necessarily convey that you're a better project manager just because you've done that certification. Yeah. What it demonstrates to the recruiter is that, hey, this guy has done something in the service, but he's keen enough to acquire a formal certification and he's invested in upgrading his skills. I think that's the message that goes out when you put a PMP against you,
Yes.
or a management capsule against you. Nobody will give you a job for just that 6-month course or the
Certification.
3-month certification. You'll get a job for what you've done all of these years in the service. I think that's the message that needs to go out.
Yes. And actually, one reason why I really want this message out to a lot of recruiters is because, when a lot of recruiters and hiring managers, first of all, you need to understand a little more about the military. It is not that every military personnel doesn't mean they hold a gun in their hands and go to the borders and fight the army. That's not exactly it. It is a real picture, true, but not everyone is doing that. There's a whole vast array of services, departments, and skill set that goes into it. And just like what Colonel Girish and Commander Raja just said, what you bring with all your 15, 20 years of service, or even your short service, is your real self, and then your certifications is your add-on. But there's another thing which recruiters and hiring managers should probably understand, is that these certifications is it's like an add-on recognition of what you already know, and that is another thing. So I'm saying this being a qualified organizational psychologist myself. I've worked in the last 18 years in people, process, and platform development with some of the very major corporates. And I don't just go with certifications when I hire people, because I know it is the passion, the skill set, and the experience that counts a lot. So if you have a certification, it is good. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have the real skill set and the abilities to perform a certain job. So, for military veterans who are actually transitioning, so you can come from, the edu core, you can come from ordnance, you can come from, supplies, signals, infantry, or any other kind of different, skill set and backgrounds. Your major skill set, what you bring in, like what Commander Raja had mentioned in the start, make the story, your experience share is very essential. That dialogue, that the way you write your CV or how you present yourself is very key and essential. And then your certifications and experiences, that is part of it, that adds on to it. So, Commander Raja, you have hired so many people, you have interviewed so many people. What are some of these key things that you notice are certain, the myths that people have, both in the corporate as well as the veteran side, that you want to address?
No, thanks for that question, Shavni. I could go on for hours on this subject. To just take off from the point that you started, right? Uh, it's it's not just the corporates who have this whole misconception. Even the veteran community is guilty of stereotyping.
Yeah.
So we paint ourselves with this broad brush that we are this one big uniformed community. But the fact of the matter is there is so much diversity even within the community, in terms of your academic qualifications, in terms of your technology exposure, the branch that you come from, the nature of duties that you've done. And for some reason, while the soft skills are definitely there, and we are bound by those threads of the soft skills and what the military ethos, as it were. When we try and stereotype ourselves, saying that, hey, I think we'll be good with security or admin duties or liaison duties or government liaison duties, I think we are doing ourselves a gross injustice. And that's where the perspective that I said about just knocking off the stripes for a moment and looking at the individual with what he brings to the table or she brings to the table, that becomes super important. And in terms of the stereotypes, one other thing that I want to talk about, which is again a great myth about it. So just by the very nature of the service and by its training, veterans always feel special and a notch above how quote unquote those civilians are, right? And while transitioning, a veteran will always discover that, hey, I'm smarter than this guy, I can talk much better than this guy. But that is the first thing that they must unlearn, right? And you will always feel smarter because that's how your grooming has been. But the conduct, the effort has to be towards assimilating and integrating with the larger group. If it means loosening up a little bit, having informal conversations, gelling with the youngsters out there, it's a skill that one develops over time. And it's important that you get accepted by that other group as being one of them. And that is super, super important for your success as a transitioning veteran, that there is an acceptance from the team that they see you as, one of them. And I think that's a very, very important part. The other bit which I think veterans need to sort of realize that, we are team leaders and we've led people into combat, and we've done things in difficult situations. So there are these soft skills, ability to think, in the face of adversity and multitask. And all of these are soft skills. While these are definitely enhancements, they alone will never get you a job. So one of the things that I see with veterans is, hey, I'm a great team player. I'm a great communicator. I'm able to do this and I'm able to do that. But while that's an add-on, you will get a job for the core skills that you bring to the table. And as you settle down in the corporate career, these soft skills will be force multipliers for your subsequent journey. That's one piece I wanted to capture. One last bit and I'll sort of shut up, right? What happens is typically military veterans, as they sort of are in a journey, they realize that, hey, I'm an engineer, but I love to train people. And I am good at mentoring, or, I'm good at doing something else, and I want to start off my second career with that. Now, that's a little tricky because you have to give a reason to the corporate organization to hire you. And what is that reason? Your CV is the reason. What you've done over the last 10, 20 years is the reason why they hire you. So one thing that I do, for example, is I like to talk to people and I love to take sessions, for example. Get into a field where your alignment with your professional profile is there. And then as you settle down in the organization and there is credibility that you develop, word spreads around that, hey, this guy can do this as well and that as well. And then you sort of, spread and get into those domains, and subsequent transitions can happen. In a company like Amazon, for example, we encourage people to move from one vertical to the other. So people should not suddenly jump into a field where they believe they are good at and they are passionate about, but the first or second job should invariably be the one which has brought them thus far. And thereafter, that the next transition could be smoother. I'll pause here and I'll let the others go before.
No, absolutely, absolutely fine. So I want to, because Commander Raja has been here for the last 5-6 years. You have already seen the transition. Colonel Girish is a very new hire into the system. So it's just been a few months. So what were the first few challenges that you, or let's say the first few culture differences that you noticed, if I may ask you? Colonel Girish, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been barely 2 months for me outside.
Yeah.
And when my ex-colleagues ask me, how do you feel right now? So I tell them, it feels pretty good. I'm very happy and I'm in fact delighted right now, but you need to ask me again after 6 months. So,
Yes.
so it's like I'm just newly married, so it's all rosy and very nice. So I'm liking the transition right now. But then in an informed opinion and a mature repartee for this will probably take another few months more.
Yes.
Yeah. But as of now, yes, I'm very happy. As far as the difference is concerned, I've actually loosened a lot. I was probably much more stiffer and curt with my questions and answers and interactions and conversations to the point. Now I take time to know the other person. When I say hi, how are you? I wait there, wait for a response. Maybe I offer a cup of coffee. Okay, would you like to have a cup of coffee? This happens. So I see there's a lot of change, cultural change in our interactions. And there's a lot more that is being done outside the office, in the sense, outside your laptops as well. It helps me build camaraderie with my core group and the other verticals as well. In the cross-functional managers, I get to interact with them. So this helps me when I interact with them more. Whereas earlier, I used to stick to my role, my vertical, that's it. Cross-functional expertise used to be there and the exposure used to be there, but in very, very limited terms. Again, speaking of approachability, I find that there's a lot of approachability here, and it is a linear environment or a horizontal uh, plane here, rather than a strictly vertical
Hierarchical
pyramid
setup. Yeah.
structure, hierarchical structure. So that way, the leadership approachability towards leadership is also better here. But then at the same time, I need to let go of my inhibitions to be able to speak out and speak up. Unlike while in services, I used to think 100 times before I spoke up.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pros and cons.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'll learn along the way and I'll be able to give you a more informed and mature reply to the question, how does the transition feel in another 4 to 5 months again? Back to you, Shubham.
I can think of one thing which, Colonel Girish and I, we were talking just about, probably you were just a month into the transition and I was like, how's the transition feel like? And his response was, I am getting to learn Outlook. It's a new thing. So there is one thing which probably a lot of times when we talk about transition, we talk about the bigger aspects. We talk about learning, certification, code skills and everything. But there are certain little nuances that we miss out, like, certain softwares that are used on a very regular basis, like Outlook. That is one. To get over the point of, speaking out of PPTs, get over your PPTs and get into the other modes of, so that is something which is, which are little things, but pretty important things for the military transition. So
I didn't know how to. I didn't know how to set up a con call. Yeah,
yeah,
that's basic.
that was one
And
of the basic.
honestly, we were coming from a world where we were writing file notings, and we had the brief here and the file there, and we used to carry those files by hand. That was the world we come from. I want to just relate an anecdote, Shrabani, and this is important. When I went for a 6-month management capsule to a B school, which is Indian Institute of Management in Indore, we were about 15, 16 of us, military officers, transitioning officers in that course. And within a month, I discovered that we are a self-fulfilling community, which means, we talk to each other, we reinforce each other's insecurities, belief systems, and we keep winding each other up with, ideas. Corporate sector is like that, and corporate sector is like this, and we are like this, and they are like that. And I realized, hey, hello, I didn't come here for this. The moment I broke free from that, and I started engaging with the youngsters who are there for the, executive MBA program, or the, even the PGP chaps who are into a fresh MBA, and they are what? They are in their late 20s, early 30s, youngsters. And the kind of perspectives that they gave me really opened my eyes. And I think, talking of stereotypes again, some of the stereotypes, we are the ones who are responsible to perpetrate. And therefore, the first thing for us to do is to break free from those, and, and sort of put in that effort to go out there and just engage and talk to people. Yes. I think that to me was a huge learning, which I got early in life.
Yes. So talking about stereotypes, what top 3 stereotypes would you like to break? If I have to just keep it very open, anyone can actually answer this. What top 3 stereotypes would you like to break? I can actually say one. All military personnel are not fighting corps. They all have different things. So that is one stereotype. What other stereotypes would you think you want to break? If I may ask this openly.
I'm going to say something very controversial here. Okay. One of the stereotypes I want to break is that there are veteran-friendly companies. Don't get me wrong when I say this, right? Okay. I know for a fact that there are a large number of companies which are looking at military talent and, onboarding them and putting through them programs. We've got Amazon, we've got Goldman Sachs, we've got Wells Fargo, we've got L&T and Flipkart in India. All of these are, but here's the thing, right? Companies don't operate for charity and welfare. Each of those companies is onboarding us because there is value that the veteran talent brings. And therefore, they bring you in because they respect you for what you bring to the table. That is a myth that I would like to break, that there are veteran friendly companies. You as a veteran are an ambassador for veteran talent for your company. So if I joined Amazon 6 years back, where there was no military talent, veteran program, and in India at least, and there were a few others who joined, and we did something, and the company stood up and took notice. That has resulted in a structured program. Similarly, companies would discover veteran talent and the potential, but each one of us transitioning veterans is the ambassador for that. And that is something that we need to realize.
Right. True. I want to
Josh
ask
has a
you.
question. I think Josh has a
Yes,
point
Josh.
to make.
So actually, being that, first of all, thank you, Bonnie, for having me here. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Not being a military person myself, but coming from a family that that has a lot of military in it, I think one of the stereotypes that I'd like to see broken, and also coming from a corporate type of mentality, is that military personnel or those that have served are in some way, shape, or form broken or not whole or unable or damaged. That's something I'd personally like to see tackled for sure. I think there's this mentality out there that military personnel may need more work or help or in some way deficient, and that's just not true.
True. True. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Because again, that comes, I think, from the very specific area of not knowing the different plethora of service lines that they bring in. In fact, for right here today, our two speakers, Commander Raja and Colonel Girish, you are from two different kind of military backgrounds. So one's from the Navy, the other's from the Army side. So a very technical versus sometimes not a very technical side, and even within the Army or even within Navy, you have so many different things. But the key thing here is that you both are working in the same corporate environment. Now that's a very fun thing. Two different work areas, you come to the same kind of corporate setup. So few key differences, if you can help us, for the corporate people to understand that what are some of these key differences that is there in these different lines of services, which is Army, Navy, and Air Force. Certain key differences that will help basic understanding for recruiters and corporates. If Commander Raj or Colonel Girish, either of you or both of you can take this.
Okay. No, actually, the three different services are very similar and yet very different as, chalk and cheese. And now you're asking me to actually compare them. So one of the things that I can straight away tell you is that, the Army, for example, has a much wider footprint in terms of presence, and by the nature of their postings, at least I can speak about the Indian Army, they are posted in far-flung areas where they do not have access to a lot of information and connectivity, so on and so forth. So they operate in very, very, isolated. So in that sense, they are a very, very close-knit, inward-looking community. Now, contrast this to the Navy, for example, where we operate along the coastal cities, mostly in bigger cities, where we are much closer to civilization. So in that sense, you would find the Navy guys a little more engaged with the civilian world, as it were. That's one major difference. The other difference is the way the service is evolved, right? The Navy, for example, has embarked on this great indigenization drive in India. So we have a lot of industry partnerships that have been built over the years. The shipbuilding itself is an extended activity for say 10 years or 12 years. So we get these opportunities where we get to spend time in certain shipyards. We are inducting a new weapon system. So you are working with the industry, you're working with technology, while my counterpart in Siachen, for example, is doing his core job, which is protecting the borders. What we are doing is something slightly different. I gave you the example of the nuclear submarine project, where I had the opportunity to work with Russians, our own Indian industry. We designed the sonar. So those are excellent exposures, all of which sort of translate. That's one. I'm not really too much privy about the Air Force, but I can speak about the Navy. And Girish, you can add.
Yes.
Yeah,
Colonel Girish, you have
thank you
had
so much.
some wide experiences. You have served in Siachen, which is the highest, battlefields and extremely isolated areas, and then also in the UN peacekeeping forces. So you were in a multicultural setup too. Can you share something from that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Shabani. Thank you, Raja sir. Again, I would say this is another stereotype that we need to break. When people speak of the army, they only speak of border postings or field area postings or Siachen tenures. There's a lot more things that
Yeah.
armed forces or the army personnel do or have been involved in. Like, for example, though I have had a Siachen tenure and I hold it very close to my heart, notwithstanding that, I have been exposed to an instructional tenure in the College of Materials Management, where I was imparting training in the Faculty of Logistics Support for young officers. I've also had a tenure with the UN Peacekeeping Force, where I was the Force Explosive Safety Officer for the entire peacekeeping force in one country with a multinational team of officers under my as my direct reportees. So these are some of the varied exposures that we've had. Other than that, I've also been exposed to a ordnance depot where the functioning similar to your warehouses that's there outside. We have fulfillment centers. Our ordnance depots are more or less similar to fulfillment centers.
Hmm.
And I spent almost 7 to 8 years working in those places. And I've seen one here, and I would say there's hardly 30 to 35% of a difference between either of them. So there's a wide gamut of experience that I can speak of the army. An army personnel takes along with him or her
Mm-hmm.
because of a number of years of exposure to varied places, postings, and appointments and organizations. Siachen may be one of it, but then there's a lot more.
Yes.
We need to break that stereotype.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Samita put up her hand briefly and she put it down. I don't know what that was. Samita, if you can just come in, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Somita. I'm so sorry my video is off. I've got a really bad cold. I'm sure you don't want to see if someone's sneezing continuously.
No
So,
worries.
yeah, I'm a veteran too. I'm an ex-Air Force officer. And I have also made a recent transition into corporate. And, we are hearing so many do's from the veterans here. But I would really like you to bring out some of the don'ts, the common traps in which veterans fall into.
Yeah.
And, I would like to point out one of these things is that we either undermine ourselves too much or we glorify ourselves too much, you know. So I would just like to hear your thoughts on it and a couple of don'ts regarding that, sir. Thank
Oh,
you so
that's
much.
such a valid point, Soumyata. Yes, I think that is something a lot of people go through is that either it's overrating or underrating, So something, but then that in between is there, but it's a little less. So
Yeah.
would you like to take this up, Raja? So like, just tell us something because you have seen so many people whom you have interviewed, and there
Yeah,
are three categories that you
yeah.
talked about that
So this
people.
is going to take some time. So I'm gonna, because I need to be very careful how I word this because the don'ts can be a little, tricky, and I don't want to come across as I'm being very prudish or,
I
I'm
just
gonna
want to
I'm gonna
add
think
something.
through this.
I just want to add something. This is no veteran or corporate bashing. So please, everyone, take it in the right spirit. We are all learning.
Yeah,
You can
absolutely.
say whatever. Please.
You know, one of the things that I have seen that in the service, the time you've spent in service, or the seniority that you have, is a good measure of your competence, and it's typically assumed and accepted that way. In the corporate sector, that may not be the case. So you can have a manager who's perhaps 10 years younger to you, who's been in the industry for maybe, who's perhaps has only 10, 12, 15 years of experience as compared to your 20 plus, and yet you can be rolling up to him. The recruiter who's your first touch point will be invariably a youngster in their 20s. uh, the person who's interviewing you may not be as experienced as possibly what you are. You can't go around asking, hey, is this person even qualified to assess me? or how is this person even judging what I bring? So some of these mindsets, that I'm senior, and those are things that you need to let go. That's one. I'm going to quickly jump into another piece, which is a little touchy. By the time one hits the middle management level in the armed forces, you are used to a certain level of comfort. You are used to dealing with support staff. You are used to dealing with executive summaries and briefs. So you want to get to the meat of the matter and disposing it. In other words, you are asking who's responsible rather than what. Now that needs to change when you come into the corporate sector. One of the first things that I learned when I came is corporate leaders would get into Excel sheets, spend hours at a time, and pour over it, ask very, very, micro level questions, and take a decision there and walk out. Now, this was very different from what I had seen in the Navy, where there will be 4 chaps putting file notings saying recommended, 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 recommended with one para each, and the 5th guy would sign. And he's not even possibly read the main body, he's read the notings. Now, that was the world that we come from. And by the time I used to read a 6-page document, I used to run out of patience by the time I came to the 2nd page. And I would jump to the 6th page to see, yeah, bol kya raha hai, what is he saying? This is something that we need to, absolutely drive ourselves clear of, because we are in that mission mode. Tick, tick, tick. I've finished this, completion report this, I've done this. The corporate sector is more about wait, pause, look 360 degrees. The buck stops with you. In many cases, you are the one to decide, and it's your neck on the line. So therefore, you need to pause, take that decision. A related quality is active listening. When somebody talks to, when I was fresh into the corporate sector, when somebody is talking to me and they've gone beyond 15 seconds, I'm already extrapolating what that person is going to say, and I'm preparing a response. Because we tend to think, okay, where is this going? Where is this going? I learned to unlearn that.
Learn to listen.
Because, active listening is something that is super important, because every member of your team comes with certain value. They will give you some experience, points they will give you. We are used to thinking quick and fast. So this is a skill that we need to absolutely, absolutely invest in. And one last point, and I will stop. We are obsessed with designations, ranks, salary structures, hierarchy. We have a mental model of placing the person in the scheme of things based on fancy designations. So my advice to the folks who are transitioning is, don't go by these fancy job titles. Vice president, general manager, deputy general manager, they don't mean a thing on themselves. You could be vice president photocopier, but focus on the role, the scope, the team size, the impact that you bring, and then sort of evaluate what that role brings. Everything, a lot of it is make believe, right? I'm going to let Girish sort of do the rest.
Girish, up to you.
The point wherein Radha sir mentioned active listening and extrapolating your reply in your mind, I'm currently going through that. And like this evening, when one of my directs was mentioning something over a call and taking me through an Excel sheet, and I was like, why doesn't he get to the point? To the point. And then I realized, as he finally got to the point, I realized, yes, all this background was required for him to finally come to that point.
Yeah.
So it is a very, very important skill that needs to be imbibed. Active listening. Second, again, as Radha sir said, we've got leaders here, team leaders, site leaders who got hardly 10 years of experience, or even 6 to 7, or in some cases, 7 years of experience as site leads. They are running the show here. And we come with the mindset of having seen more, or knowing more than the other person by virtue of our sheer experience. One thing that we need to understand is that this is a completely different platform, where I would say that we need to be slightly more careful is at times I do tell people when they ask me, you're a veteran, you've got 21 years of experience. I tell them it may be, but then I'm still a corporate fresher. I may have the people skills, but as far as the on the job skills are concerned in a corporate environment, please consider me as a fresher. So I need to learn a lot more. My 21 years, I'm carrying whatever people skills I've learned there in a completely different environment where there is little scope for deviating from the set path or from a hierarchy. There's very little scope of moving from the norm. Whereas this side of the fence, it is you are allowed to explore. You are allowed to speak out. You are allowed to interact with people. So we need to be more open to listening, taking feedback, and a lot more of patience and taking feedbacks without getting or feeling antagonistic about it.
Absolutely.
That is more important, I would say. Back to you, Shaboni.
There's just one point I want to make. Okay, this is all during the corporate transition or in the company. Even before you make that transition, whenever I come across CVs which say, I'm operations, projects, programs, HR, L&D, training, I know this is a veteran. Because no civilian work is solved will write a CV like that. One thing that we need to understand is the military trains us to be interchangeable assets and people who are moved around across different roles. So we become jack of all trades. The corporate world respects depth, not width. So when you transition, one of the things that you need to make up in your mind is what are those one or two niche areas where I want to sort of dig my heels in and I want to focus on. Yeah. When I say I manage teams and therefore I can be an HR manager, nothing could be further from the truth. Because HR in itself in the corporate sector is a very specialized service. There is comp and benefits. There is, there's a whole lot of other things which we have not really done. So that's one thing that I want to tell the veterans, that based on what you've done, decide what is that depth that you want to seek. And the first couple of roles that you take will define how your corporate career flows. That's not to say that you will not be able to make the switch ever to the passion part, which I said, I'm great with L&D, so I want to jump to L&D at some point. You can, of course, do that. But the first couple of roles will define how your corporate path will be shaped. And therefore, instead of sort of casting your net far and wide, try and do, what we call, point firing instead of area firing. Generally, you fire and something will hit the bullseye. Doesn't work like that.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, Commander Raja. I actually, as we move into the next section, which is the question, answer, and feedback, I would actually like to request Satyanarayan, who is also a veteran or transitioning veteran, and he is pursuing his education in HR. He wants to pursue a career in HR, and there are certain, some kind of challenges he's facing because corporates are not quite aware of how to place a veteran in an HR setup. So Satyanarayan, would you like to actually share some of your experiences and the challenges you are facing? And, we'll try to see how best we can, work around educating the corporates to understand the skill set transfers.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Okay, thank you, guest speakers. It's nice, really enriching and insightful sessions. I got a lot to know. I'm yet to, transit to a corporate field. Before that, my brief introduction. So as I was from Navy, Indian Navy, and I joined as a sailor rank, and I retired from petty officer rank. But after clearing CAT, now I am pursuing a 2 years full-time MBA in HR specialization in Xavier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar. Sir was told about the stereotype though I have got a good score in CAT, but due to this stereotypical, I did not get a lot of IIMs and all these things as a full time. Yeah, I got a executive program, but I didn't get a full time. I wish to take a full time because to get some skills over that. As Raja sir already mentioned that we, the defense persons have, we don't have in-depth knowledge. We have got a job enrichment. We have got a lot of, wide range of knowledge, but we do not have in-depth knowledge. For that, I wish to, take a full-time program. But even I was called for the interview for the IMT. There they respect us very well, especially me very well. But finally got not selected because of this stereotypical, because of my vast service experience and all that sort of things. Apart from that, this is my second year, and in my first year end, we supposed to there's a education mandate. We supposed to clear a internship program that is of 3 months. It's a mandatory one. So due to this huge experience, I didn't shortlist anywhere. Shortlist is the primary thing. After that, we supposed to perform whatever in the interview, but we could, especially I could not shortlist it due to this of these 15 years of experience. So that is there's a major demerit of that the corporators generally keeping into the eye for these veterans. Yes, ma'am, that is the situation. And apart from that, some other points like Saraj mentioned, because I personally see in LinkedIn and all the courses, veterans generally get into field like operation, some in the computer sector, and some the supply chain and all this logistics section. But HR, I didn't especially find lot more number of people. So this is one of my questions, or it is a challenge maybe, how to place as veteran, and that is in a non-official cadre from Indian Navy or some veteran field to corporate field. Yeah, these are the sort of challenges that I generally face.
Okay. No, Satya, first of all, I think compliments to you for having invested in the education that you have. And I think you've raised the bar in terms of qualifying CAT and getting into an A-grade institution for your academic pursuits. So I think full marks to you. I think, like I was saying earlier, no amount of knowledge will ever go waste. So absorb learning like a sponge. So that's my first advice to you. There's something that you need to understand about the corporate sector, and this has got nothing to do with veterans or non-veterans. There are cost centers and there are profit centers, which means there are parts of a business which bring in the money, which means sales, marketing, operations, which are contributing to the money. And there are part of the business setups which are supporting, so which means security and HR, even IT can be here or there depending on the industry. So very, the maths of it is very simple. Yeah. If I have the number of roles that you will find in a profit center are always going to be higher than the roles that you find in a cost center. So if you target your gaze or your radar towards profit centers, which means operations, supply chain, logistics, anything where the number of roles are going to go. I'll give you the example of a fulfillment center in Amazon, and Girish will bear me out on this. A big fulfillment center like say a Hyderabad or a Bombay, where we have the biggest of 3.5 lakh, 4 lakh square feet. You will have close to about 25 to 30 operations leaders, just operations leaders. Whereas the HR will be 1 or 2 supporting this entire framework. So that's the first thing you need to understand. What is that piece of the pie that you are targeting, right? The second thing is, who is your competitor or contemporary? So the guy who, suppose I gave the example of the FC fulfillment center, right? So I need to place one human resource partner or 2 HRBPs for that entire fulfillment center. They will be guys with 10 or 12 years of experience who've done similar work in a similar industry, in a similar environment, and they are operating there. Now, think of it from the recruiter's perspective. You are somebody who comes with, I'll give you an answer. hold on, I'll come to what you're saying. But I'm saying that, it's extremely difficult for us to be able to convince the recruiter that here is Satya, who's done 15 years in the Navy, great guy with great degrees, but will it give him the confidence to put Satya in the middle of the HR role as compared to somebody who spent time in an ITC or a Pepsi or a Coke? That's the first question. You have to switch to the other side and look at it. Now, I'm going to give you the answer. How do you get into this space? Now, the workaround to get into that space is focus on what you've done all through in the service. What branch are you from in the service?
Sir, the seaman executive branch.
Seaman executive branch. So you are an operations guy and you are a general service guy, right? So
Yes.
find your way, and there are roles which will operate on the fringe. So you will have HR information services or HR share services, which are essentially operational roles, which are about HR processes. So it's like managing, for example, a call center where HR processes are sorted within a certain SLA. Now, once you get into that ecosystem, you start interacting with HR leaders and they are your business partners. And then your skill comes to the fore. So like I said, it's like getting into the shallow end of the swimming pool and making it to the deep end. So I don't have a prescriptive answer, but perhaps that's the way you would like to sort of take this. Girish?
Okay. Thank you so much, Raja sir. Thanks, Satya. Again, heartiest congratulations on such a humongous achievement. It's by no means simple feat. We are proud of you, and I'm sure you are proud of yourself. You must be, for having dragged the cat and got into XIB. Now, adding to the HR myth, I can give you a short example. I know at least 2 director HRs in the corporate veterans. In Renault, there is one, and in Cognizant, there is one. Both of them veterans, and they're both director HRs. I just know these 2, but then I'm sure there'll be many more like them. And I've met them only again on LinkedIn. I connected with them on LinkedIn. One of them did the senior management program with me also. So there are veterans in the HR space also, but very, very limited. Very few far in between. So I'm sure be focused, you will crack it. It's just a matter of time. Back to you, Shaboni.
Thank you, sir.
He has something to say. He is actually from the HCM experience side, I guess. Please.
Yeah, actually, good evening, all of you. Commander retired Raja, Colonel retired Girish, and also Nicholas. You have shared wonderful insights. And actually, I can relate, say, what Satyanarayan Swain is going through with my own life and also my transition in the Navy. Okay, so I am currently the group head of HR for a BFSI company based out of Bombay. Okay,
You can send in your CV, Satya, first to start with.
Yes.
Send in right away.
Yeah. And there are more similarities to say your career or your journey with the Navy. So I was also a petty officer in the digital communications, that is the tactical communications side. And I was also an instructor, qualified signals instructor. So I transitioned into HR, and how my transition happened, I thought I will just share my journey so that you can pick up certain aspects where actually you joining Xavier's Institute of Management and also pursuing a HR degree, whether it is an executive degree or a full-time degree, it's quite a tremendous or a stupendous achievement. First, I would like to congratulate on that. So I had this experience of working with the Naval Psychological Research Unit, okay, in 1996 when I was at Kochi. Okay, so I used to prepare cognitive ability tests, personality ability tests, which are administered to kind of understand and divide the Naval Academy, NDA, and also the other people into different trades. So I have got that experience. And I also was fortunate to join the Naval Pay Office, where I have done, as Commander Raja mentioned, that I was able to kind of do the comp and ben for almost 55,000 people. And I have been an instructor, signal instructor, where I was doing the L&D part of it. See, the Naval Institute of Educational and Training. Okay, so this is the wide array of experience I was able to kind of say get through in the Navy. However, when I transitioned into the Navy, there are certain nuances which are there in the corporate realm. And I think it would take 2 to 3 years for us to kind of say settle into certain roles. As Commander Retired Raja has mentioned, yes, there are certain operational roles in the initial phase of your transition to take up as head of HRSS, Human Resources Shared Service, or you can kind of say work at a recruitment administration part of it. Like that, you can pick up roles and then transition to different levels. If you think your strengths are there in L&D, okay, you can do that. If you think your strengths are there in talent management, you can work and identifying the hypos and also put them into the succession plan, replacement plan, and also develop them. I think that is how you can kind of say pursue. One thing, don't kind of say limit yourselves. What the Commander Retired Raja shared as a keynote when he started, he said, you just say shut off what you have done with the Navy. You find or discover the real you. You find your intrinsic worth. You understand what drives you. And I think actually you have demonstrated by even joining XIMB that you are fully capable enough to kind of say rise in the ranks and go up the ladder, even though you might kind of say find it little challenging in the initial phase. I think you would kind of say grow up. You can be in touch with me. And I would say continue with professional development. So what helped me is not the PGDBM, which I have done at Wellinkers. So I have done my SHRM SCP, which is the Society for Human Resource Management Senior Certified Professional. So I think you need to kind of say do your professional development courses, because once you kind of say move up the ladder, you will find a plateau. And then what you need to do is you need to just say revive yourselves, upskill yourselves, and then kind of say catapult to the next level. I think with this plan or a framework in place, I think you will do great wonders. You can be in touch with us as HR fraternity and also the veteran community. You would definitely do well. I think in this entire thing, if you're able to relate your life and what I have done, I think you would do great. And thank you so much, Commander Raja. Your insights were very wisdom bites, I would say. Means you have identified certain things which are very, very crucial. I think Colonel Girish, really appreciate the humility which you have in sharing openly what you have kind of said done in the short span of transition. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Martin.
Thank you.
I think this is lovely to hear these voices.
Soumyata has something.
Yeah, so I would just like to first of all thank Raja sir and Girish sir for their insights. And Satya, congrats. It's really brave of you to do what you're doing. Trust me, a lot of us are not able to. And I don't know, it's not a question, just a comment. I mean, others can give their perspective on it. I think, along your journey of transition, you'll not always hear what you want to hear. It's absolutely not easy. And it requires a lot of adjustment mentally. Obviously, you have to be on top of your game. You need qualifications and everything. I think you need to be emotionally also very strong. And getting a veteran mentor helps a lot. I mean, thanks to Raja sir, he's been a mentor for me for some time. He's really guided me. So I think that's something every veteran should. Even Girish sir mentioned the importance of mentorship, here. Get a senior mentor who tells you things as they are, doesn't sugarcoat them, and you don't have to like it. You have to accept it and just work towards it. So that's something which I wanted to say. Thank you so much, guys. This is a great, this has been a great session, really insightful. And Satya, all the best, especially to you. I'm sure you're going to crack it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Soumyata.
Thank you.
Thank you, Soumya.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much, all of you. Is there any other questions or thoughts that you have? Or with, I think we are actually proceeding towards the end of our last 10 minutes. So any questions or any thoughts that you may have? Satya, you can absolutely get in touch with Mr. Martin Luther. He's going to be your best mentor here. The same journey, same experience. So yes. So that's going to be really helpful. So any other last moment thoughts that you may have? Anyone? I'm opening this platform to all. Raja sir, something from you?
No, not really. I think it is experiential, and I have a lot of people who reach out to me for advice, and Swamita is one of them, of course. And I break them down typically into these three buckets, and I always say this: the first one of them, come with a plain, clean slate, and they are willing to sort of say, okay, how do I do this? How do I approach this from scratch? And you tell them, and they're open to listen. There are some others who've got it half full, and they have their own stereotypes and their own belief systems which have been conditioned, and all they're trying to do is to validate whether what you're saying is matching with what they have. And every time you say something different, like what Samhita said, they're gonna come back to you and say, no, but I think that is the case. So I think the first step, and the third category is, of course, the people who figured it all out for themselves, and they just want you, hey, I need that referral for that job. This is the three sets of people who sort of reach out to me, and each one of them are at the different levels of preparation, as it were. And it's our job as people who already transitioned to give them that customized guidance and support to whatever level it's possible. This is a different world. This is a different world. There are people who've done extremely well in the service but come outside and struggled. There are people who've been okay in service but come outside and done very well. This is just a different game. And what will there's a friend of mine who used to say that if you are long enough in the game will give you a chance. So I want to leave this audience with that message, that just hang in there, just play the game long enough, and you can be sure the game will give you a chance. Absolutely. So I think that's a positive note to sort of generally.
Yes, absolutely. And being as an organizational development specialist, working with change management for people, process, and platform myself for the last 17-18 years, one thing I can say is any change is never easy. It's always met with a lot of resistance. It's always met with a lot of doubts, and people who have extreme skill sets also start doubting themselves. So it's not easy, and that's understandable, and that's okay. So the most important few things which our eminent speakers have said is reach out to someone who has been through that kind of journey. The primary reason why we are having this platform is to bring together people who have been through those kind of challenges, changes, sharing experiences and learning. There could be things which are big and major differences, and there could be things which are so small but negligible that people tend to ignore, but they play a very different very strong role in the behavioral and cultural adjustments and changes. So it could be just anything and any kind. So feel free to open up, reach out, communicate, talk to the people who have been through similar journeys. Like Colonel Girish said, that LinkedIn is a great place to actually interact with people, meet people, and share your journeys, learn. So I think that is one thing we can always do. We will have this, hopefully we will have this once every month. So we are always going to be open to discuss and share experiences and journeys and learn from each other and help make this veteran transition support program as smooth and seamless for everyone. So please join, stay in touch, stay connected and stay engaged. And thank you everyone for joining in.
Thank you, Shravani. Thank you everybody for the fantastic opportunity. This is fun.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.